Okay, we're back. Our silicone has been completely de-aired now with the vacuum chamber. You see right here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to begin pouring it into the pre-made molds that we did in the earlier videos. And because it's vacuum, I'm not going to do any brushing directly onto the sculpt, which is usually done if you're just going to gravity pour the silicone on there and it's not been de-aired. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a gentle stream and go into each mold and pour the silicone. Might be out of frame, but you'll get the idea. And what I do is I just pour it and I leave it in one spot, usually the corner of the mold. And I'll just pour it down thin. Just let it go, and gravity will just let it go evenly over the piece. It helps a lot without the air being removed from the silicone, because it makes it flow tighter to the sculpt. And pouring in a thin stream like this also helps cutting down on additional air getting into the silicone as it travels. Once I pour the first one here, I'll put the camera on and you guys can take a look at it. This one's almost done. Another method you'll be using is, if you don't have a vacuum pot, you'll be duplicating the same method called the bombs away method, and you'll try to keep the silicone as high and as far away as possible from the mold to give it a thin stream like this to cut down on the air that's going into the over the sculpt. The last thing you want is any air pockets on top of the sculpt, because it'll reflect in either what they call resin boogers on the casting when it comes out. You don't want to damage any of the surface detail of that. Okay, we poured the Hulk's head first, and you get an idea here of how it looks when the silicone's poured. That's up to a level where we need it to be. Now we're going to move on next to the hand over here. Let's push this over. We don't have to worry about those toothpicks, because once we separate the mold, we'll just pull those out, and we'll drill up with a drill bit to make the air track come completely through the top of the silicone once it's done. The mold is fairly easy to manipulate once it's cured. You can use drills, you can use an X-Acto knife to cut out some additional tracks, whatever. The silicone is quite pliable and it's easy to work with or to adjust later on once it's cured. Pick this corner right here. Nice thin stream. Silicone just flowing over all the parts on its own, and gravity's doing its thing now. Now with the last set of molds here that I'll be doing next in the cups and a tube, it's a one-part mold, and although I did vacuum the silicone, I prefer to put those molds, and what I'm going to do is put those molds in a pressure pot, because if you don't have a vacuum chamber, you can pressurize the molds and it'll make them a bit more solid. It kind of pushes the air towards into the center part of the silicone, where it's not going to affect the sculpt. And I've had a lot of I've done vacuum pressure molds, for many years before I started using vacuum, and I've had good results with it. Just starting out, you might not have those options, but if you're going to stick with it and do it as a production basis later on, it's good to get a pressure pot and a vacuum chamber, because it's going to give you higher quality molds and higher quality castings. But it looks like I just mixed enough silicone to cover this, and I'll have to mix another batch to do the one-part molds, which is fine. We can mix a little bit more, it's not a problem. But for this video, I'll just do these two for now, and when we come back on the next video, I'll do the one-part pieces. It's going to be the same technique where I just pour it into each one. But the separating of the one parts will be a bit different. You can use an X-Acto knife and use a zigzag motion, which they recommend, but they also have another little tool called a Mulkey knife, and I find that invaluable. It's a bit expensive, but it's a really good tool. What it does is instead of just cutting through, it leaves a key as well, because it's a knife with like a ridge in it. So you're actually making a key while you cut the one-part mold, and what that does is it prevents any kind of slippage when you have a one-part mold and you just put it back together and rubber band it. When you use X-Acto blades, it tends to not grip as tightly and you get a little slippage, and it'll give you an all-set mold line in one spot. But the Mulkey knife kind of cuts down on that problem and gives you a much better result. I think we have just enough silicone to cover this up, and I don't mind covering up the pour spout there. It's not going to be a problem. Once we separate the mold and remove the clay spot, you'll be able to see exactly right where it's going, and we can just cut through with an X-Acto blade to make it come all the way through the top in order to pour the resin in. Having some spare little pieces of cardboard, some cut out from the other box we usually did for the mold, is some leftover cardboard, and I use this to just scoop inside the bucket to get as much silicone out as you can. Bring that down, just let's scoop right off the side. Silicone's expensive. You want to try to utilize as much as you can when you're making your molds. And if there's ever an event where you mix too much silicone, don't panic. You can leave it in the bottom of the bucket, let it cure, and I will show you a method later on which they call chunking. It's taking some silicone and cutting it up into strips, and when you have larger molds you can add it to fresh silicone to help cut down on the cost. I don't recommend chunking with old molds. Some guys like to recycle old molds. I don't like doing that because it kind of weakens the newer stuff. I just like to, I'll chunk with unused silicone that might be left over from a batch you mixed. And when we do a larger piece of the sculpt, like the Hulk body, I'll show you how to chunk with some fresh silicone in that situation. Okay, these are 2 poured right now. That's about all we need to do. They just need to settle up now. We're going to give them 24 hours to cure, and once they're cured, we'll come back and separate those. In the meantime, I'll pour silicone into these guys here, the 1 parts, and then on the next video I'll come back and we'll get those into the pressure tank after we vacuum the silicone and fill them up. Okay, that's it for now.